Hello and welcome to the next of the guided walks, self-guided walks for the Cornwall Archaeological Society. We're here on a glorious day on the cliffs above Perranporth, and we're going to look round the remains of the British and Colonial Explosives Company. They made nitroglycerine here. We've just left the car park behind me and we're walking along this track until we get to a right angled bend. So the path we followed goes to the right and we're taking a smaller path to the left. Over to the left of us now, there's a bund. That's a embankment. At the moment behind it is the I think it's a sewage digester for the Natural Generation Company. But I think originally that bund dates from the explosives factory and was around the preparation room where they used to get all the glycerine and ingredients ready for the factory, which is out on the cliffs straight in front of me. Okay, so we've come along the track. Over my shoulder there's the bund which went round the preparation room, which is where they got the charges of glycerine ready to go down to the buildings on the cliff. I'm standing in the middle of a large concrete area. It's a concrete floor. This is actually the floor of the nitric acid factory. In order to make nitroglycerine, you react glycerine with fuming concentrated nitric acid. Now that was extremely difficult and dangerous to transport by road or rail, and so was made on site. In order to make it, you needed concentrated sulfuric acid, which was a lot easier to transport. So they brought the concentrated sulfuric acid here in glass carboys, and they brought it into this factory that I'm standing about in the middle of now. There were 12 reactors along here. Each of them were making fuming nitric acid, which was taken down to the cliffs to react with the glycerine. To the right hand side of me there was another building which held compressors, generators, steam generators for heating, and they were all used down on the cliff. So the compressed air was used to stir the mixtures, the steam was sent down in pipes to heat the reactor vessels, and the electricity was used on site. Straight in front of me there is a shaft. It's fenced off, so don't go over the fences. The shaft was actually for a tin mine, the Good Fortune tin mine, which is over to the left of me behind this bund. And it was a stipulation of the lease for the building that they had to work tin here. The people that own the land, if they could get the tin worked, they actually got a levy on all the tin produced. So they tended in Perranporth, they quite often stipulated on leases of land that you had to work the tin mine as well. So in front of me is one of the shafts for the tin mine. So we're going to carry on along here. Stone chap somewhere off to the right of me. I'll mark the route I've taken on the map. You because somewhere here there is a bund. I think I'm just in the middle of it. There's a part of the bund there. I've just crossed over a wall and it goes round there. The map I've got of the building doesn't tell me what that, or the map I've got of the factory doesn't tell me what that bund was surrounding. So we're heading straight across to where Ross is in front of us. And coming in somewhere from the left, probably along the line of here, is a tramway. The tramway came from the preparation area, and all the liquids were brought on wheeled containers, drums on wheels, and they were brought to the individual buildings here. And I think just there is a there's a line of the tramway which came straight down over here. So this is the first of the buildings of the factory proper, and this is where the nitroglycerine and the nitric acid were combined. So this looks like a quarry from up here. It surrounded a small building, and then it was the nitrator. So we're going to go down there. I'm going to go around the edge of it and in through that path just there. Okay, I'm just walking around the edge here to get down to the path. It's a bit tussocky on the heather, you just be careful. There's a bit of gorse here as well in this heather, so you probably need to bring firm shoes. And I'm going into this, it's actually a quarry. They've quarried the area away and used the spoil to make the bunds further round. Okay, so this is the first part of the factory proper. There are three different processes going on. There's nitrating, which happened here, separation, which happened further down, and then washing, which is further down still. And if you can see, I'm standing on a piece of concrete. This was the foundations for the nitrating vessel. The vessel was something like 1.5 meters wide, probably by 3.5 meters tall, because it was in a two-storied building. So this would be the bottom of it, but the main work, or the person operating it, would have been way above me on the first floor. The nitric acid was in this big vessel where I'm standing, and it was heated to about 20 degrees centigrade, and a charge of glycerine was added, about 100 weight I think, was sprayed in gradually. It had to be sprayed in over the hour, over about an hour. You couldn't spray it in all at once. I've now got a dog around me. He's on record now. Okay, so the dog's gone. a charge of about 100 weight of glycerine was brought here on the rail on the tramway. Nitric acid was already in the vessel, heated to 20 degrees centigrade to get the reaction going, and then the glycerine was gradually sprayed in. Compressed air was forced in the bottom to stir the whole process up, but once it started, it actually generated its own heat. So although you had to warm it at the beginning, you then had to start cooling it, because if it got too hot, the reaction got so violent it would actually fume off all the nitroglycerine, and if it got very violent it would all go up. So you had to keep cooling it, and you had to control it for about an hour. This process took, depending on the ambient temperature. If it took longer than 2.5 hours, it was also very dangerous, because nitroglycerine in contact with the acid for 2.5 hours produced an explosive mixture. So on top of the cylinder there was 2 large thermometers, and the operator pushed compressed air down it or more glycerine, depending on what the temperature was, to try and keep the temperature around about 20 degrees. In order that he didn't go to sleep and forget to control the reaction, instead of giving him something to sit on, they gave him a one-legged stool. So he actually had to stay awake the whole time. If he fell asleep, he fell off the stool, presumably woke up and could control the reaction. He had to watch all the time to make sure the fumes coming off weren't brown. If the fumes were brown, the reaction was going too quickly and he needed to slow it down. That reaction took about an hour, and it left an emulsion of nitroglycerine and nitric acid, spent nitric acid, and that had to be separated. So it was quite an explosive mixture anyway, so it was sent off to the next part of the process, down what they call, I think of them as pipes, but they call them gutters. So whether they had a cover over the top, I don't know, but they call them gutters. And from here down to the next separating room, they had to get over this lump of rock here, and they've built or dug a tunnel just here. So that tunnel goes 80 metres through the solid rock. It costs an absolute fortune to drill it or dig it, and goes down to the next room where we're going to end up. There's a second way through here, and I don't actually know why there are 2 tunnels here. That one goes lower than this one, so I think in order to get the gradient, they had, for the liquid, they had to go down that one. This one may be for people to walk down, I don't know. So Ros is going to go down here and try and video it. I'm going to walk along that one and video it. This tunnel, for some reason, crosses right underneath that tunnel there and comes out on that side over there. So we're going to try and do this and see how we get on. So we're not suggesting that you do this yourselves. Ros is going to try and video it as we go. That was a plane from Perranporth airfield. Okay, so we're going down this other tunnel. Me photographing Roz, photographing me. I think this was a walkway for people to walk down. Probably an easy way between the different houses or the different buildings. So here we are, there's another shaft. Now, I'm not particularly advising you to come down here because this is quite loose and slippery. So there's the exit to the tunnel. Yeah, sorry. So I'm standing in somewhere near where the separation room was. Unfortunately, it's all been taken away. So you can see where Roz is at the exit to the tunnel. The nitroglycerine emulsion would have come somewhere down to about where I am now. I can't see any sign, but I can see there's a bund going round all the way around there and possibly down that side, but certainly round here there's a bund. So this is the separation room. So here we are in the separating house. The nitroglycerine emulsion would come into here and it would be put into a large container which held the whole mix and left for an hour. After an hour, the nitroglycerine, which was lighter than the acid, rose to the top, and obviously the heavy acid sank to the bottom. When it's in that state, a tap in the side of the tank enabled them to draw off the nitroglycerine. So it was taken out of the separating tank and put into a tank full of water. As the level got close to the tap, you started getting a mixture of nitroglycerine and acid. This was drawn off through a separate tap into a rubber bucket. If there was sufficient nitroglycerine in it, it was put into the wash tank. Otherwise, it was left and ran off further down the hill. What they didn't want was lots of acid in with the nitroglycerine. So they've got a tank full of nitroglycerine that's been in the water, and that goes off to the next process down the hill, which is the wash and store house. So we'll go there next. We'll just go to the edge and look at it from the top. very difficult to see some of these things because later on in the factory's life a lot of modifications were made, and I think they've removed all the bunds around here. But you can see there's a bund by the southwest coast path sign post that runs out to the edge of the cliff, along, then back into the hillside here. So the area in the middle there was the wash and store. So we'll go down there next. If you want to go down here, it's quite steep. Otherwise you can go right the way round to it. Yeah, I don't know what it was. Okay, so we've come down the slope there. As I say, if you don't like coming down slopes like that, you can go right the way around the top and down into here again. So this area here is the final wash and store. The nitroglycerine came down here through another gutter, and it was washed in water, sufficient water to get rid of all the nitric acid, so that you were just left with nitroglycerine and no acid. It was quite dangerous to move nitroglycerine, and this factory mainly made dynamite. It made dynamite, a bit of gelignite, but mainly dynamite. And that dynamite is nitroglycerine absorbed into a clay mineral called Kieselguhr, which came from Germany. The Kieselguhr was taken to the building next to the acid factory that we started at. It was heated in an oven to drive off all the water. Then it was brought down here, and measured quantities of nitroglycerine were put onto the Kieselguhr, which absorbed it. Once it was in that state, it was relatively safe to move, and it was taken off to a further mixing room, which we'll go to shortly. So it wasn't moved as a liquid, it was absorbed onto Kieselguhr and moved as a solid. The washing water from here was waste, and it was taken down to over the cliff, and in a normal situation they would have extracted every single bit of nitroglycerine from it, because it was dangerous to store. There was an instance where the wash water was sent off to a pond, but it had some nitroglycerine in it which collected at the bottom of the pond and exploded. So they wanted to get rid of all the nitroglycerine. I don't know quite what they did here, because further down from here there's no way to get the nitroglycerine back up to the start of the process. So I think it probably just went over the cliff. We're going to go along here and look over the cliff and see the wastewater tanks. Okay, so we've just come from the final wash and store there. We've come along the path, and just here there's obviously another tunnel going here, but we're going to go over that to the edge of the cliff. Pick your way through the gorse bushes. It's perfectly safe coming over here until you get to the edge. Now, I have a map of the factory as it was, but the purpose of this building isn't mentioned. But if we look at it, there's steps up to the top of the brickwork there. So that looks to me like the top of the brickwork was actually a floor level. So this was probably some sort of tank underneath a building, with probably a wooden shed on top of that. So there would have been a floor over the tank as it stands there, with a shed over the top of it. And within the tank there was probably lead tanks. Every one of these buildings was lined with lead because they didn't want spillages soaking into the sand, because that could cause an explosion. So all the buildings were lined with, the floors were lined with lead. I'm not going down. I might put a photograph. I don't know if you can see at the back of the that building there, there's a tunnel, and I think that's the tunnel that I just stepped over. And that seems to have been some sort of guttering which ran from the final store to here. So this is almost certainly some storage for water. They did tend to have one large tank full of cold water at the bottom of the system, so that if any of the processes got out of hand and started getting violent, they could just drain all the stuff that's in the tank out along the gutter and straight down to somewhere like this, where it would mix with the water, and that would stop the reaction. So I think this is what they call a drowning tank, because there's obviously a way for the water to get down here. If it's not a drowning tank, it's the final water tank. Although just further down there's another building. I'll put a still photograph of it, which is right on the edge of the cliff. And my guess is that they just put the excess liquid straight over the edge of the cliff. There are two tunnels down here coming out here, because the way the factory works, there were two nitrators, two separators, and one final wash store. And each of the nitrators and separators would have had a way of getting water down to here. So I think that's what this is. It's probably a drown tank, in case the reactions got out of hand. But I've got nothing that tells me that. That's just my own ideas. Gorgeous views of Perranporth Beach. So that's where we've just stood at the wash and store. A tramway ran along this path, which is the southwest coast path now, where the people are, into this, which was the intermediate mixing house. And we've had a long discussion over where we think the bunds which separated off are. I think Ros is standing probably in the middle of the mixing house, with a bund in the middle of the frame now, coming across here and ending up on that mound just there. I think that's a bund, that's one bund. I think the mixing house was in between there, with the tramway running from the wash and store to here. So we've just left the mixing store, and we're going to try and go up straight in front of us to get to the upper level. I think this whole area has been bulldozed at some time, probably by the wolframite mine, which is just above us now, or in a later stage of the explosives factory. So we've arrived at the upper level now, but I'm not sure where the tramways went to get up here. Immediately to the right of us, there's the wolframite mine, and we'll look at that in a minute. So we're walking along what I think is a tramway. think that area down there has been bulldozed as part of the wolframite mine, which is, as you look at this picture, it's just to the left of us here. So I think that has taken away a lot of the works of the explosives factory. But I'm pretty sure this is a tramway. And just here is a bunded enclosure, so that would have had a small hut in it. It looks like a small magazine to me. It's well above the area of the separators, so the liquid couldn't have flowed here. So I think this was some sort of magazine. And we can now see this small path here is heading straight towards the tunnel there. So I think I'm still on the tram road here. Okay, so this was a bit of a problem when we first came round here, because we couldn't work out exactly what was happening. If you look in the websites, you'll find they've called these things storage rooms, but it's quite muddled because you've got things from lots of different times here. So going there, so if we go to the far end, we go through a tunnel. There's obviously some more structures down there. Anyway, let's look at this tunnel. It's quite a nice tunnel. It's not jagged bricks like the one Ros went down earlier. So I don't think this is a pipe run. I couldn't really work out what it was until I plotted all the old mining map onto a modern satellite image, which let me work out what exactly was going on. According to the mining map, a tramway runs straight through the middle of this area. So what I think we've got is just here. I'm standing in what was a bund, and at the top of that bit there, that's where the top of the bund was originally in the 1890s. And in order to get tram trucks through into the inside of this bund, which is to the right of me, they wouldn't have needed a tunnel. And I think the reason that tunnel is nicely shaped is that people pushed trucks through it, and they may have even taken horses through it or ponies through it. So I think that's why it's a nice tunnel. What we've got in the middle here, complete with lots of coloured graffiti, is some sort of tank, storage tank. And looking at the brickwork, I think this is wartime, 1938-39. So I think this is something to do with the wolframite mine immediately at the back of me. Just here there was an identical tunnel to the one we've just been in. So you can see the top of the bund at the top there. So I'm standing in what would have been the bund, which has been removed. So the bund came straight towards me, turned a right angle and went down there, turned a right angle and went over that tunnel, and did the same on the other side. So the tramway went inside those tunnels straight through the middle of this bund. And it looks like when the wolframite mine was here, that was likely to be bombed possibly, they've turned this second tunnel into an air raid shelter, because that's what I think that is. I think that's a Second World War air raid shelter. And if we look at the plan, you can see the tram road going straight through the middle of it, with the bypass going where I walked earlier. And they obviously sometimes wanted to take stuff inside this bund on a tram, and at other times they wanted to avoid it, so they went round the outside. My guess is they took, I think this may well have been something to do with mixing, further mixing stage. So they brought roughly mixed dynamite here and mixed it thoroughly, but sometimes if they wanted to take other stuff and not take it through the mixing house, they brought it round the outside on what is a bypass. And I'll put a detail of the map up to show you exactly where I am and what I'm talking about. So this is from 2, possibly 3 different ages, and it's almost like doing archaeology, trying to work out what's happening. So I think the bund on this side came out to about here, went straight away from me and onto that tunnel, which you can see over there. So that on top of the tunnel is the remains of the bund. That's how high the bund would have been, and that's how high the bund would have been on this one. And I think all this has been bulldozed when the wolframite mine was built. Okay, we're just going to cross here now. We're looking for the cartridging sheds, and we think this is one across here. And then we're going back over to the wolframite mine, so we're going to retrace our steps in a minute. That's it in there. Very difficult to get near the cartridging sheds because they are all surrounded by gorse. So I've just come here and I'm looking across, and you'll notice it's a very small bund on the far side of the gorse bushes. I'll try and outline it if I can. When the dynamite had been mixed, it was brought up to this area, and there are probably 15 or 20 sheds along here, each with its own little bund, and each would have only held probably 4 people. And the dynamite paste was extruded into a long sausage shape, separated off to the right length and wrapped in waxed paper. So each of these sheds would be doing the same thing. Largely women would be doing this. They were searched every morning to make sure they had nothing metallic, no hairpins, no slides or anything like that, combs, and that they hadn't brought anything that could cause an explosion into the shed. So there would be numerous of these sheds with 4 people in each one, each making sticks of dynamite in wax paper, packing them in boxes. Then they would be taken off along the tram lines to the magazines, which are now 100 metres over the top, towards the Wolframite mine, some of them, and over the top, where we're going to end up shortly. So you can't see it very well, sorry, those are the cartridging sheds. So we're heading off to the Wolframite mine still. And I've just seen along that path, you can see there's a large bund on the right and the end of a bund on the left, and in the middle of it there's the small building. I think that building dates from the war because it's concrete. I don't think it's part of the explosives factory. I think that was actually a storage magazine for either made sticks of dynamite coming out of the cartridge sheds behind me. So we're now going to carry on and go up that path. And that's the back of the bund that I've just looked at it, so it's really obvious. So we just carry straight on this path. And you can see the Wolframite mine coming into sight there. So we're going over to there now. Okay, so just coming up to the Wolframite mine. Unfortunately, I know even less about mining than I do about nitroglycerine production. So I'll tell you what I think things are, but whether they are or not, I can't tell you. I'm pretty certain that's one of the shafts. There are many shafts to this mine, but a lot of them originate in the beach at the bottom of this cliff, or the cliff to one side. I think this shaft here dates from 1939. The closeness of war in 1939 made it advisable for the UK to have its own source of tungsten. We weren't going to be guaranteed supplies of tungsten from anywhere else, and this was quite a productive tungsten mine. So this was started in 1938. It worked through till about 1944, when I guess the war was running down and our supplies of tungsten from elsewhere in the world had actually been insured then, probably because the Battle of the Atlantic was over. So this this mine closed in about 1944, something like that, I think. So we've got the shaft, one of the shafts there. I've looked on photographs and this is called a settling pond, so I'm going to go with that. On the far side of the settling pond there's another shaft with the metal wigwam over the top of it. So there's the second shaft, which means that somewhere across here must have been the winding gear and the pit head gear for bringing men and materials up that shaft. Just on the right here there are two buddles, which means, I guess, that on this side just here this must have been some sort of vanning floor. If it's the same as tin, if processing wolframite is the same as tin, there would have been a vanning floor here. I'll just go over there and look down on it. There'd be a vanning floor here, and after the vanning the fine material would have gone through into the buddles for further separation. So the buddles had an arm sweeping round in the middle of them. Water was continuously fed into it and left over the top, took all the fines with it and left the ore, the metal ore in the base of the buddle. So every now and again that was cleared out. So if we carry on up here, I've just seen, it looks like another buddle in the floor there. But it's got some more concrete foundations on top of it. So I think this area here was the pit head gear. So there would have been winches which needed bolting down to the ground, and the winding gear at the top. So I think these are some sort of supports for the winding gear, along with these at the back. And there's another shaft there by the look of it. So over in that direction below where the people are, there's a large big cliff, and at the bottom of that is the entrance to the mine that was used prior to 1944. So it's been mined for many years. Previously they accessed it from the beach, and from 44 onwards it was done by these shafts here. So just looking straight below me, it looks as though there was a channel there that some sort of cable went through. But if we go across here, you can see there's a semicircular slot. That looks like there was a flywheel went in there, and that would have been the supports for the axle that the flywheel was running on. So that would all have been part of the winding gear, I guess, for the shafts. I just want to get and look down on the buddles. Okay, so there's the buddles, the shaft in the far side of them, and the settling pond. The bay in the distance is Perranporth Beach and Perranporth Sands. So the area behind that are the sand dunes. And if you've come here specially to look at this for a day, it's always worth spending the morning here and the afternoon over there, because there's some Piran's oratory to look at, the church which was engulfed in sand, and virtually moved. There's parts of it still left, but the interior's not there. And a cross to celebrate St Piran. So that's all on that, the far hillside above the beach. And you get to it from the far side. I'm in total ignorance as to what this is. It looks as though it might be something that a cable ran up, but whatever happens, the water, the rainfall runs down it into that pipe along there and following the centre of the frame down there past the flowers through there and into this slot where the flywheel went. And I have absolutely no idea why that's there. Just intriguing. I've no idea what I'm looking at really here, but it's quite intriguing because there's a large lump of bedrock which has been sliced down with flat sides and surrounded by concrete. And inside the concrete they've obviously included aggregate that's got copper in it, because that green colour there is copper. It's coming out everywhere. So we're back on the upper level of the Wolframite mine where the winding gear is. There's quite an extensive set of buildings used to be here, but are now just concrete slabs. So we're going to walk back to where the car is via the cartridging sheds. So we're going just over this way here. I've obviously been talking too much because the memory card on my GoPro's run out, so I'm having to do everything else on the phone from now on. So we've just come from the Wolframite mine there, walk down the road, and you come to this wall with a gap in it. On the far side is the building that we looked at a while back from the other side, where I said it was I don't think that's from the explosives factory. I think that's a wartime installation, something to do with a mine. But I don't know if you can see, but coming away from that building down to the right of me, there's quite a groove, and I'm going to go down into it. So I'm looking straight along now. That's the line of one of the tramways coming from that, what would have been a magazine, I think, or some sort of, yeah, I think it was a magazine, through this way, which obviously you can't see, and there's a bridge behind that which I'll go to now. So I'm now standing on a bridge. This bridge went over the tram track which came through from that tree, the green tree in the middle of the frame, and along under there. There's a set of points down there because another line runs off in that direction towards those buildings, and on either side of that line there were the cartridging sheds. So you can see a couple of bunds if I zoom in. Those are the remains of some of the bunds of the cartridging sheds, but they're not very obvious because that road has taken half of the bunds away, I think. So going the other way, under this bridge, the tram track went under that tree and into this bund here, that storage bund. And I think this is where they stored the dynamite prior to shipping it off to wherever they wanted to, wherever they sold it to. So now we're just going to carry on down this track, past those buildings, past the boat. It looks a bit strange, but it's okay. It's safe and it's a public road. So we'll go that way. It's actually quite difficult to get a photograph of these cartridging sheds. There is a button straight in front of me, just there in the middle of the frame, on the far side of the gorse bush where the brambles are, and they ran a line straight down that side and straight from the distance towards me here, and I'm standing on the bund here, but it's quite difficult for you to see. As you walk along that road, just look out on your left hand side as you come down there, and you'll be able to see the remains of them. So we're just walking straight back out now to the road. And just keep following this road now to bring you back to the car park. Heading along these roads, the buildings you can see in front, they are all mine buildings from Good Fortune mine. I didn't take any video of the mine buildings, so I've included a still photograph. Thanks very much for watching this video. Bye.